Well, the Commerce Department released its quarterly report today, reigniting recession fears. The big takeaway is that the economy contracted 0.3% in the first quarter of 2025, the first time since 2022.
Analysts say the decline could be attributed to a massive surge of imports, 41%, and a decrease in government spending.
The surge was in part an effort for importers to beat Trump's tariffs. The president took to Truth Social this morning and wrote, "This is Biden's stock market, not Trump's. I didn't take over until January 20th. Tariffs will soon start kicking in, and companies are starting to move into the USA in record numbers. Our country will boom, but we have to get rid of the Biden overhang. This will take a while. Has nothing to do with tariffs, only that he left us with bad numbers. But when the boom begins, it will be like no other. Be patient."
Meanwhile, Trump signed a couple of executive orders Tuesday to ease some tariffs on car makers. Trump said during a Michigan rally that he was giving car makers a, quote, little flexibility, but ultimately wants them to manufacture in the U.S.
Senior editor at The Federalist, John Daniel Davidson, wrote on X, "Trump's tariffs wars are forcing Americans to confront an uncomfortable truth. Globalism and the free trade it promises relies on industrial slave labor overseas. We shouldn't be okay with that."
Meanwhile, pollster Nate Silver wrote, "The people still defending the tariffs now are the equivalent of people who defended Biden running for re-election even after the debate. The best litmus test I've ever seen for complete partisan hackery."
And
no words.
Here's what I think is going to get the Trump administration in trouble. So Trump is saying, no, they're working. Hold on. We're going to have companies moving back here. I think that's going to take longer than he's counting on, and we're not going to have the tariffs in place long enough for that to make sense. I've said this on the show multiple times now. If you're starting to do exceptions for car makers and other industries, well, then we're just going to have totally crony capitalism,
right,
where the government is saying, here's the policy is tariffs. Oh, but well, okay, you get an exception, you get an exception, and you get an exception. That is going to encourage more intermingling between government and the private sector, as companies will have to go to D.C. to meet with lobbyists to get meetings with the administration so that their industry, their sector, their firm gets a break. That is just going to be the worst of all conceivable circumstances. If you're either do this and have it in place because you're going to see through this policy that will hurt us in the short term, but you think it's important to have the manufacturing capacity back in the United States. I don't agree with that, but fine, that's your policy. Do it. Or please admit this policy is bad and just stop doing it. Don't do it, but then grant exceptions for all the preferred firms. That's going to be like a Soviet type system where you got to know a guy in the office to get the thing. Like, that's going to be bad.
Well, we know where you stand on tariffs. You would like there to be no tariffs.
Zero.
This is where you and I differ. I do think that tariffs have a strategic use if you are targeting, for example, industries that might not otherwise flourish here. You just want to give them a head start. You saw some of this with solar panels and past administrations, for example. I think the larger challenge that we're seeing right now with what's playing out with tariffs, I mean, and there are many, let's be clear, is that there doesn't seem to be a plan at all. I mean, who can forget the infamous chart from quote-unquote Liberation Day where there was this blanket set of tariffs set across the entire globe, including places where there are literally no human beings to have a tariff against. I mean, I think this is why you're seeing the roiling in the financial markets. People feel uncertainty, they feel chaos, and it's not clear that this administration really has a plan for why it's doing tariffs, other than that this president is very clear he believes in them. It's also, I think, very striking to note the difference between Reagan-era theories and approach in terms of the financial markets, which really much more huge to where you are, Robby. And
yeah, I know.
Today, it's a very strange flip. But those were the days when it used to be that unions were the ones that were basically saying tariff everything.
Yes. Well, the Republican Party has absorbed a lot of working class, labor-friendly voters, and so it's had to adjust its policies. I understand that. I would point to those old Reagan days as a time period of unparalleled economic growth and greatness, and say that the free trade policies were a big part of that. Again, I can defend the tariffs if it's part of convincing other countries to lower their barriers to trade as well. But sometimes we hear that from people in the administration, but sometimes we hear from way too much from Peter Navarro, who should not even have a job in the administration anymore. He's trying to sabotage the entire economy. He's a degrowther. He wants he wants to set the country back, and he still somehow has a job in the administration. It is really baffling to me. It's because he went to jail for Trump, and Trump feels some sense of loyalty to him for that. But he is quite deliberately, if you go read the things he was talking about and teaching and running for office as a Democrat in the early 90s, it was about sabotaging the economy because he's anti-growth. That is not the mindset we want in a successful Republican administration that is going to grow the economy. Shrinking economy is not good. We want to grow. I mean, these are pretty basic, fundamental conservative values that are correct and don't need to be turned away from in terms of have a good economy that allows businesses to invest and to create jobs, and rising tide lifts all boats. That's good. If we have to build literally everything here, it's going to take so much time to be set up to do that again. Everything's going to be more expensive in the meantime, and voters don't want that. Voters have flipped on Trump over this.
Right? There are certain things that should be made in other countries because they will forever be in a position to make them more cheaply. For example, if they happen to have natural resources that we don't, that allow them to process minerals, for example, we were talking about electric vehicles, minerals, in a way that we just can't do it. We don't have those things here. I think part of the challenge, so there feels like there's no real structured plan in place here. You're literally hearing different things depending on who you're hearing describe the tariffs, whether it's the president or Peter Navarro or really any number of cabinet secretaries. They're essentially saying three things. On the one hand, you have sometimes they say that tariffs are just a matter of philosophy. This is a thing we should do, it's a good thing, and that's the end of the story. You may hear another leader in the administration say, actually, this is about raising revenue. So we should definitely have really high tariffs because we're going to raise revenue, never mind the fact that it's actually revenue raised from American consumers. And then the third thing you hear is actually none of this is real. This is a bit of a pump fake because what we really want to do is just negotiate with these countries. And those three things cannot all be true at the same time.
Coming up, another candidate joins the crowded field in Michigan Senate race. We'll talk to him.